Hi everyone, off the podium. I think this is number 73. It's been a while since I've done this, but a good friend who now lives in New York, we met in Seattle years ago, and he's back for a CD release party and a performance. Gregg Belisle-Chi is here with us, guitarist, composer. Welcome to Off the Podium.
Thanks a lot for having me, Tigran.
So why are you in town? And by the way, this will be released after your show, so it's not really a show promotional thing. But
That's fine.
why are you in town?
A couple of years ago, I wrote a piece called Book of Hours, and it's a 45-minute through-composed piece. Moved to New York and recorded it with my band, and now we're on the road touring it and releasing it tonight. So we're starting in Seattle and moving our way down the West Coast and doing a bunch of shows.
So one thing that comes to mind right away when I read about you, and I've been, just following the careers of various musicians, some would classify you as a jazz musician, but you yourself just write guitarist. You don't write jazz guitarist. And the new generation tends to do that, just write guitarist. Why? And actually, I welcome that. I love that you do that.
Yeah.
But when did that change? If you know, when did that change happen for guitarists or jazz musicians in general? And if there was a moment that you felt that it happened for the world of jazz or classical music where it fused kind of?
I think I'm more comfortable just saying guitarist because then it's not limited to any kind of one thing. I'm interested in more music than just jazz, even though that was what I was studying at Cornish and at UW. I want to keep it more broad, I actually, in terms of like listening and musical interests, I'm more interested in like classical music or contemporary classical music or even folk music. But jazz being such a rich tradition with improvisation, that's kind of the big thing. So I would consider myself a jazz musician in that sense. That improvisation is still much of what I do, but it's not limited to that,
So for those who are listening, and it's always great to hear from artists and know about their inspirations, a couple of classical maybe that are in that classical genre, even though it's hard to say, but some in classical, more of a classical genre, some in jazz. What are some of your inspirations, or maybe some people that you think most people don't know but have inspired you, or you've learned from, either through recordings or...
Well, the first name that comes to mind is Schoenberg. After hearing his music, that kind of just blew the lid off of everything, in terms of how I think about music. And he was introduced to me by my teacher and mentor, and kind of my guy who I look up to and respect at the highest is Kung Fu. He's probably been the biggest influence on me directly. So Kung, Schoenberg, Bill Frisell was another Seattleite who's actually, he recently moved to New York. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, Beethoven. I listen to, everybody that everybody else listens to,
Any pop music that you listen to?
Yeah. I was just listening to Paul Simon this morning. Paul Simon was a big one. The Beatles were a big one growing up. And I don't really have my finger like on the pulse of like contemporary pop music. I don't really know what's going on. You probably have a better idea than I do. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's tough. And there's just some people, I remember taking a class years ago, and one of my professors said, okay, so classical music is the academic music, and jazz, pop, and everything else is under the pop genre. So I was like, okay, that just doesn't really make sense. Even at the time, it didn't make sense, but even more now with the world's colliding. It's I was gonna say through composed. What other jazz artists have done that before?
Not a lot that I'm familiar with. Ben Monder is a really amazing guitar player in New York who's played with everybody, and he does a lot of. I think he would call himself a quote unquote jazz guitarist, but most of his records there's hardly any improvisation. They're like 9-minute or more through composed pieces, and I think I definitely drew a lot of inspiration from that kind of model. And I like long form music, you know what I mean? I think it's challenging for me, and I think I like it's fun to try to write something that doesn't sound like anything else.
Any particular instrumentation you're comfortable writing for, or anyone that you constantly tend to go back to, maybe?
I don't really know. I think it just I write and then I kind of arrange from there.
Huh.
You know, sometimes like you have an instrumentation in your head and it doesn't quite work out the way you want it to. You know, I guess I like to be more flexible.
Okay.
Yeah, my buddy Andy Clausen is a really amazing composer, trombone player, and I think he writes everything kind of grand staff style, like bass clef, treble clef, maybe a few treble clefs.
Okay.
And he can arrange his music for all sorts of instrumentations. You know, I've played his pieces duo, and I've played them in a big band. You know, so he's a much more talented composer than I am. He's just got such huge ears and skills that I don't have yet.
So if you were in words to describe the current album, what you're doing, how would you describe it? What would you say about it? Instrumentation, the genre, what people would hear, what you want them to hear, what it's inspired from, just anything you want.
It's actually the first instrumental record that I've done. The last two records that I did both had vocals. One was a solo guitar album, and then there was a couple duos with vocals. And then the second album I did was a song cycle. So this is actually like the first instrumental thing that I've released. Yeah. So that's kind of new. Although all the melodies were written to texts. Okay. You know. So, but just without any singing.
So this the acoustic world of guitar and electric. Do you go into both, or?
I did the second record I did, the song cycle. I played some acoustic guitar, but I think I just consider myself more of an electric player. I've always played electric, and
Yeah.
that's I guess where my interests are. But I would like to do more acoustic music. I don't know. There are people who do it much better than I do, so maybe they should do it instead.
I was going to say, somehow guitarists tend to have such great vision for just finding gigs and making a career. I've had so many guitarists on this podcast. I think that's the one instrument that I've had the most of.
Really?
And I've just had so many of them who've somehow were able to make a career where other musicians tend to struggle. But I don't know what it is about guitar. And I was saying this to another musician a couple of days ago, that guitarists somehow manage to put a career together better than many other musicians.
Maybe because we fit in the corner easier. I don't know. Yeah, I remember growing up, like any place I could play, I would go there and just like sit in the corner and play and put out a tip jar. I mean, I guess maybe we've been doing that for hundreds of years, but not every like coffee shop's gonna have a grand piano, or nobody wants to listen to like a solo trombonist,
sure.
You know what I mean? But guitar is so pleasant,
I was going to say advice to young musicians, but you sort of covered it. And you yourself are still under the bracket of young musician.
I
but
guess
what would you tell a young musician trying to make it in the music world?
I don't really know. I think about that a lot. We're doing a few master classes on this tour, and I'm trying to have like some things prepared to say, but everybody's path is different, and sometimes it's not really in your control. Like I didn't think that I would be where I'm at today, and it's hard to like look back and see what things I did that got me there. Sometimes it seems like coincidence, but I do think I would say that you should like kind of follow through with your interests. I think like academia specifically makes students think that they need to like pursue like a very narrow path. Like if you're in the jazz department, you should be playing jazz, but broaden your interests if you're interested in other things.
Will those distinctions ever separate, ever come together and not really have a jazz and classical department? Do you think that will happen?
I would hope so. My philosophy is that musicians should they should have the the melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic flexibility to play whatever kind of music that they want. And I think jazz does offer that. Classical music does too, but I think there's less focus on improvisation.
Yeah.
But
and I just wish there was more focus on improvisation in classical.
Me too.
I'll tell you an interesting story, and I think I've said this on the podcast before. So Andrew Jocelyn, who's a violinist in town, and he's played with a lot of pop acts, Macklemore and all these artists. I met him. He came. He's from Bainbridge, so I invited him to work with my Bainbridge Youth Orchestra. We did a festival, and he came. And the younger kids, the ones that were under 13, when he would give them an idea, even just to improvise on a very easy chord progression. The younger kids would just take it and just go with it with
Wow.
no fear. The older kids, the ones that were in high school, more experienced, way stronger players technically, they would just freeze. He'd be like, dude, play any note you want in a C major scale. They would just play it in random order. They would freeze. They would not know what to do. These younger kids, they just went for it, and they would just go for it for a while. And he was so impressed. We would look at each other. I was like, I thought the older younger musician would play way better, but it's crazy. You have to start helping them with that process at a younger age, I think, so they don't have those fears.
Yeah, I think they were just less self-conscious.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and there's more sense of play. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's I think great improvisers are totally fearless, and they move their ego out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
I mean, great artists talk about that all the time. You know, I think it was Picasso who always said, "I'm trying to paint more childlike."
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to get back to that kind of reckless abandon.
Yeah.
Of just, you know, I'm just going to go for this and not have any kind of reservations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
This kind of happened quick because you came to town, and we kind of had the idea of doing a podcast, but it was on and off, and we finally made it happen, which is great. But I posted a question, and we got a response about, you know, someone wants to ask you a question, and someone you know, Lorenzo Guggenheim, who's a conductor, who lived in Seattle for a short time. He said, what do you think is the relation between jazz and religion nowadays?
Wow. Jazz and religion. That's a heavy question, Lorenzo.
Yeah. If you can, you're welcome to go for it and answer it in your own way, or just avoid it and answer anything you want.
You know what's funny? My cousin who studies music or I think she got her degree somewhere in Bogota, Colombia. Mm-hmm. She did her dissertation or her thesis on this piece that I'm releasing, Book of Hours. And I think it was called like the secularization of quote unquote religious music or something like that, you know. I mean, the Book of Hours is based on the Mass, like the Latin Mass, you know, like in the Catholic Church or whatever. But I myself am not a religious person. I just used it as a format to create this music, you know. And if you think about it, I mean, I'm sure a lot of composers did that. I mean, they just used this kind of religious musical format to like compose a piece, you know. Yeah, I don't know if I see any direct correlation between like jazz, quote unquote jazz, and religion, or, you know. But I guess the musical religious tradition definitely informed what I did, you know. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah.
Now I have to have Lorenzo on to talk about that question and more. So what's next? You have a tour coming up. Where are you going? What's the plan? What are the next steps?
After this tour, I go back to New York, and I'll try to do a West Coast tour, or an East Coast tour. But I'm doing another record in June. Yeah, right now it was like the past 2 years I've just been writing so much music. It's like 3 books of music that I have with 3 different bands. So, and I'm just trying to like keep my head above water, you know. I'm trying to like do it all. So I'm doing a trio record in June, and then I'll hopefully do some touring of that, you know. I'm just trying to play and write as much as possible. I don't really have a 5-year goal or whatever, you know.
You teach.
I used to, some.
Why not anymore?
It was in New Jersey. I was commuting from Brooklyn to New Jersey, and it was like an hour and a half. Yeah. And I loved the school that I was at. The students were cool, the faculty was cool, but it was too far for not enough. You know, it didn't make another job opportunity opened up and like literally down my street. So I just took that, you know, and had to say goodbye to teaching. But I also am somewhat reluctant to be a teacher. I like hanging out with other musicians and talking about things, but I don't like the format of teacher and pupil. Okay. You know what I mean? I just kind of want it to be more sharing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So someday you'll be a college professor, because that format might be a little bit, or maybe master classes, just the way you're doing it now, because I think that relationship is the way, the format you like it would fit better with master classes.
Seems way more fun. There's a legendary jazz pianist, Barry Harris, who played with like Charlie Parker and Coleman Hawkins. He's just turned 89, I think, but he's been for years and years doing these workshops in Seattle or in New York. For $15, anybody can come and just for 6 hours. It's like a 6-hour masterclass, like every week. They'll talk about piano, songs, and it's mostly geared towards piano players. But I don't think he's ever had a college position, you know. But I think it's the same thing. He just wants it to be. I mean, he's definitely a master, and people are definitely going to him for this information. But yeah, you know, I like that format much better. Well, work on your scales and read these etudes or whatever. It's not quite my personality.
What were you like, the younger Gregg? And what was the interest? Was there an instant interest in music, or were there other things?
My dad's a violin player.
Really?
Yeah, like he like an amateur violin player.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think he wanted me to play cello. But he had a guitar at his apartment, and I said, I'm going to do that instead. Okay. It was kind of like an act of rebellion, you know. So when I was a teenager, I was like getting interested in the guitar, and then I just discovered MTV, and I would watch music videos all day, and that's kind of all I wanted to do, so I played guitar instead. But I mean, yeah, I grew up he listened to a lot of Baroque music, mostly Bach and Vivaldi. I think I've heard the Four Seasons like 1,000 times. I'm not joking. It's one of my least favorite pieces now. But my mom was more interested in, you know, pop music, so it was like classical music with dad, pop music with mom. Yeah, so it was always kind of in the house. Yeah.
So if we were to open your iPad or whatever you use to listen to music, what's the last thing you've heard?
I was listening to Beethoven String Quartet, number 12 in E flat on my way over here.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Let's see what's in there right now. I'm very kind of intentional with my listening. So right now it's string quartets. So I've got the middle to late string quartets with Quartetto Italiano. The Bartók string quartets with the Takas. Takas string quartet. The Ligeti string quartets, and there's another one. I can't remember. Maybe Shostakovich. That might be it, actually. Yeah. I don't know. What are you checking out right now?
That's tough. I don't know. Sometimes I try not to listen to too much music, because I have so many rehearsals every week that I try not to listen to other things. But I actually do listen to a lot of jazz. A lot of people don't know that, and I'm actually surprised that you listen to a lot of classical music, because in my mind I always thought of you as a jazz musician, and it's great because I meet more and more musicians who are like, I meet a classical musician that says, I listen to a lot of jazz, and I do. Even growing up, I listened to a lot more jazz, and I still do listen to a lot more jazz, even in some cases more so than classical music on my own time.
It's funny what you said though about like rehearsing all the time. It's like hard to carve out time to like listen, like you know, like with attention. You know, I mean, I can hardly finish a piece anymore, you know. Like on my way over here, I think I made it in 2 movements. But I haven't like had uninterrupted music time in a long time. You know. So I think it took me like 3 years to make it all the way through the Rite of Spring. Not because like I love that piece, but I just never had like enough time to just hear the whole thing, you know.
So with all the stuff you're doing, being a conductor, have you ever considered writing for orchestra, or at least a chamber orchestra?
The Book of Hours piece was originally written for a chamber ensemble. So I guess I kind of have, but it was like 2 trumpets, tenor, alto, saxophone, bass clarinet, drums, violin, and guitar. Was the original instrumentation. And then I rearranged it for trio, guitar, keys, and drums, and now it's quartet with bass. I am really interested in writing for a more classical orchestral instrumentation, but I don't really have I don't know how to start that
Yeah.
quite yet.
Start that as in started on your own terms, or started as in you have to have a collaborator?
I think there would have to be a group that I was writing for.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe I would start writing a piece and it just so magically happened to work out for a string quartet or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I need to do more score study,
Yeah.
I think, before I feel ready to try
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And actually, one of my youth orchestras, I have the senior orchestra members who are seniors and been with the orchestra for a long time. Play a solo with the orchestra.
Cool.
It's kind of a farewell. So I have this bass player who is really interested in all kinds of music and actually surprisingly knew about Frank Zappa. He's like 17 and knew about Frank Zappa. So he wrote this piece because he didn't want to do anything on the bass solo. So he wrote a piece for the orchestra, so we're performing it. And I thought it was really cool because that's the first time, I've done this for years, that's the first time someone approached me and said, hey, I don't want to play a solo, but I'll write a piece if you're willing to play
That's
it.
awesome.
So we're playing this 2-movement piece, and it's really cool. It's a fast movement and a slow movement, and it's just a fusion of a lot of different things that he's had an interest in, rock, and he has a moment for bass kind of improv area, and it's a really cool piece.
That's
it's
neat.
a really cool piece, and it's so great to have like a 17-year-old who's willing to do that, because I never had the confidence at 17 to do that. So
Yeah. Man, I remember like my first day at Cornish, I realized that there was a composition department, and I was like, whoa, that can be like your major? Like that I don't know why, but that kind of blew my mind. Like, like middle school and high school, public school, like music education, there's no encouragement to like write music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially in like a jazz or classical tradition, at least where I was growing up. But I think it's really important. I think to give kids like that the permission to do something like that. You know what I mean? Rather than just like sitting in front of a music stand and playing somebody else's music. Like, try to create something on your own. Yeah, that's really neat.
So why Cornish? Did you grow up in Washington, or you came from somewhere else? Why Cornish?
This is the only school I applied to. I actually met Chuck at my hometown. He was playing with this guitar player Larry Coryell, who was also from my hometown, and he was doing like a homecoming show, and Chuck Deerdorf was on the gig, and Larry had heard about me from his old teacher and invited me on stage to play. So I played a couple songs, and Chuck said, hey, you should consider applying to Cornish. And that was the only I did that, and then just went there. I didn't really, yeah, kind of an unremarkable story, I think, but Seattle's not that far from where I grew up, so it seemed like the right choice. But yeah, then the UW thing was the master's, the TA thing kind of this position opened up, and Kung invited me, and I'd always wanted to work with Kung and Ted Poor, and I really love that school, and kind of what they're about. So that was a really amazing experience.
And that's a place where it seems like things are really coming together. What we talk about with the classical, so-called classical, and jazz, and really coming together. It's really neat.
Yeah. Who were you hanging out with there? You did your doctorate there.
I did my doctorate, but it was orchestral conducting. So the teachers there at the time, and still, David Robbie and Ludovic Merlot.
Right. But is Ludovic moving on?
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
They have Dalsgaard now.
Oh cool.
Yeah, starting fall, it'll be Dalsgaard.
Wow. One of the most moving musical experiences I ever saw was Ives 4 at Benaroya. Yeah. Christina Valdez was playing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah.
So we haven't got to it, but your personal life a little bit. The records you talked about prior to this record, one of them must have been with your wife.
Both of them were with Chelsea, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we met at Cornish. We met my first day at school.
Wow.
Yeah, in Jim Knapp's music theory class.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think we started dating like a few months after that. And we've been together almost 11 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
How does that collaboration happen?
Well,
I love hearing about husband and wife or partners collaborating.
I would assume it's difficult for every couple.
Yeah.
With my writing, I'm like very, very specific with what I want. And so and thankfully, like, Chelsea is very accommodating, and she'll kind of go. I mean, there is kind of a back and forth, and she's a much better singer than I am, obviously. But you know, she'll say, "This works. This doesn't work. I can do this. I can't do that." You know, so it was a really great learning experience, learning how to write for the voice and being with a singer. You know what I mean? But yeah, we don't collaborate much anymore. It's, mostly because my interests have been leaning more towards instrumental music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, after you get married and like you really know your partner, and sometimes you feel like you're saying other things. Sometimes, you know, like, I don't know.
That's tough. That's tough. But maybe 10 years from now, you'll come back and do an anniversary
concert,
or an album.
we still play music together. Yeah. We have a gig. We actually play church music together. We do this church gig in Brooklyn, but neither of us are in charge of that. We're both hired to play, so we're playing music together all the time, but not each other's. So, but we still I do want to play the Carl Sandburg music again, which is the song cycle that I wrote. I just, you know, so busy with other things. It'll happen. Yeah.
Greg, it's been great.
Thanks, Tigran. It was really fun.
Anything that we missed that we want to get to?
I don't think so, man. I don't think so. Check out the Book of Hours record and subscribe to this podcast.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you so much. And all of this in half an hour. I feel like I'm also getting better at these things because I keep asking questions and I get better. So part of the reason I do these podcasts is because it's a fun conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great when you have someone who's actually willing to talk. So
cool.
It's been great having you.
It's been nice catching up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.